Okay, here we are in the time of Corona. Yeah, we can call it freediving in the time of Corona. It's a sequel to Marquez's Love in the Time of Cholera. And off we go. It's a bit of a ramble on my part, that's all. There's nothing structured here. And probably, I just hope it won't bore you to death, because we'll try and make it short at least. I have noticed that there's a huge change, a tidal change in the way people approach information on freediving. And sometimes it gives me something that a disease that I caught off a little black dog that I had called CBS, compulsive biting syndrome. I think, why'd you ask that question? Couldn't you have done a better job yourself? So I'm going to get on to this a little bit. Off I go about what questions and how. The other day I was asked a question by someone who was having trouble working out the strategy of his descent on a constant weight with bifins dive. How many wide kicks should I do? How wide should the kicks be? And how many should I do before I start backing off or not backing off? That was the question. Now, wait a minute. Let's have a little think about that. What's missing in this picture? I don't know what you look like. I don't know what age you are. I don't know how athletic you are. I don't even know what level of diver you are or what depth we're talking about. I have no idea of that. That's basic. Let's move on from there. I don't know where you're from and where you're doing your diving. Are you in a 7mm suit in 4 or 5 degree water in Norway? Or are you in the Philippines with hardly a suit at all? Or maybe a 1.5mm suit? There's maybe a slight difference in the way one would attack a dive according to that. I don't know how stiff your fins are. I don't know how good your style is. Where on earth do you begin to answer a question like that? Well, it's obviously going to involve a very long conversation and exchange of information. The trouble is that people expect a sort of bumper sticker answer. Boom, that's it. I have the solution for you. Kick 3 times, wide, 85 centimeters. Come on, guys. Now, couldn't you have worked that one out for yourself? One of the whole points of training is to fine-tune questions like that with individual experimentation. The next guy who's going to come along is going to say, well, is there a table for these things? Oh yes, we have a table. According to your weight, your physical build, your body mass, your biomass index, etc. Are you kidding me? Let's go back to the days when there were only champions and also-rans. There were no trainers. Maybe there was one, I remember there was a single trainer who had an international voice, and he happened to be in France, and his name was Claude Chapuis. In the whole world of freediving, I don't think that at that time, and that was the early 90s, that I knew of a single other trainer in existence in the world. So, who did one go to for knowledge? A very unusual person, yourself. This reminds me of a story that I was told. It's quite fun. I don't know whether the story is true. I strongly suspect it isn't, but it's a very good educational story. It says that after the first days of Glasnost, the Americans had had rumors of a Soviet rocket engine that was something that they couldn't even begin to aspire to. So anyway, they sent a deputation out in the spirit of glasnost to, I don't know where, Kazakhstan or somewhere, wherever there was a Russian rocket facility. And they went out there and they were shocked. They found 2 or 3 of these engines lying around in a shed, neglected. And then they started to analyze them, take them apart, try to understand what happened here. And they were astonished, knocked over. So one of their scientists eventually said, he said it to his Soviet counterpart, he said, I can't imagine how you came up with this. We haven't even got machines that would have allowed us to measure the kind of achievement that you put into this thing. And the Soviet scientist said, we had the secret. And he said, what was it? And the Soviet scientist said, trial and error. Now, I don't know if that's true, but that's exactly what used to happen in the old days in freediving. You tried something, it worked. You tried something and it didn't work. How much time should I persist with it? All those questions you had to work out for yourself. Nowadays, everybody expects somebody else to do their thinking for them. Right there, you've either become sheep and followers, or alternatively, you've also taken away a lot of the joy of being a real pioneer in it. That's what I used to say 10 years ago and have stopped saying, that everybody is a pioneer in freediving. Now, today, one of the first people you should go to if you're a beginner is, of course, a world champion. Ah, really? There was a Chinese gentleman, I'm sure I'll pronounce this wrong, but his name is called Sun Tzu. And he wrote a wonderful treatise called The Art of War. It wasn't a book, it was, I believe, tablets. Anyway, one of the things that he said that was really impressive and still taught in military colleges and not yet absorbed by half the militaries of the earth is a victorious army never changes its tactics. Boy, have I seen that proven in my lifetime. In the early days, or much earlier days, was present when the records were held by people in bifins, male and female. All of them were aware of the challenge of people coming up with a monofin, but all of them were resisting it. They weren't going to move over into monofins. I can quote them to you. Maybe they have since, but they didn't then, and they didn't until they retired. Tanya Streeter, Umberto Pellizzari, Pipin Ferreras, etc. A victorious army never changes its tactics. Well, Pipin and Pellizzari were getting paid by sponsors for records broken every year. You don't want to set yourself back retraining everything by months of training for something that may or may not work. It's an unknown quantity. You go forward on a known quantity. So maybe some champions, particularly in asked about more exoteric things, haven't got a clue what they're doing themselves. It's kind of a secret, but that's true. They don't really know. They think they know at some stage, but they don't necessarily really know. Sometimes they do. But does that make them the best person to ask? And even if they've come up with an answer or a solution, is it a general solution? Should everybody be copying that solution? No. In the same way as the gentleman who asked me about how should he be finning. Man, there are all kinds of body types. Not everyone is going to have the same strategy. Now for very deep dives, we have 2-part descents, 3-part descents, all kinds of things. Which is the most efficient? It's not which is the most efficient, it is which one is the most efficient for you to try, and how should we trim it to perfect it for you, and see what should we do in your training to match up for the challenges for the path that we've chosen. That's what happens. And if more of us thought that way, it would cut out an awful lot of the babble that's on the internet at the moment. It would cut out the nonsense about training. When I went down to Dahab, I think I've said this in another video fairly recently, and saw a complete mishmash of what I call periodization. Basically, the way we train is you plan for a 6-month period, and at the end of it you have a particular objective. And that 6-month period is divided into 3 periods of 2 months each. The first one is non-specific training, just general health, general fitness, aerobic, anaerobic, all the rest of it, flexibility, general overall training of your body in preparation for the stresses that are to come. But as you get closer to your objective, you have to be more and more and more specific. So the middle period is mixed, where you bring in more things that are more specific, but possibly not something that you want to start too early with because you'll burn out and overtrain. And then the last period is depth. And you need time for it. And if you haven't got the time, then limit your expectations, guys. If you've only got a month to pack everything in, do all your winter training or your interim period before you get down there, so that when you get down there, you're ready to do your depth training and not mix it with a ton of other things. You shouldn't be weightlifting, doing body weight exercises, doing yoga, doing breathing exercises, doing meditation, all this kind of nonsense during the deep diving period. You've got enough to do. Remember one thing, and this is something that we've always maintained. Rest in freediving is training. It's not the opposite of training. It's not like a muscle. One's an adipose muscle of another. This isn't that. This rest is actually training. It's when you're actually adapting and improving. When certain things in your body are being replenished, certain chemicals, like nitric oxide, for an example. All kinds of things, changes, chemical changes are taking place in the body that are specific to our sport. Remember always one thing about depth diving. It has something that no other sport in the world has. There are things that you can compare to other sports, but it's got one thing that none of the others have. Blood shift. Blood shift produces an awful, overwhelming amount of free radicals. Ischemia, reperfusion, free radicals. Free radicals the body has to learn to cope with. It has certain resources. They take time to replenish themselves. Time is of the essence, and therefore rest. And I don't mean rest by going for a 10-mile run instead. That's not rest, guys. Rest means rest. Like Brexit means Brexit. So get used to that idea. that rest is part of deep water training. It's not just a cop-out from training. So I've had a bit of a go at a few things there. You'll have to forgive me for that. But it's with the goodwill of trying to encourage people to learn to be their own teachers. Because somebody else's solutions may not be the best for you. And good coaches, good trainers, will always understand how it has to be very individual and how you don't hand out training plans to people that you have no control over because they'll give you a bad name, because they're not going to be done necessarily as you envisage them being done. You have no control over how they're being done, and probably there'll be very little communication between the beginning of the exercise and the end of it. With our version of that, it's very simple. Before every training, we talk. After every training, we talk. And together, we form a strategy for constructing the next training session. There is no such thing as doing a plan and we're going to stick to it. We have to work out to begin at the beginning what our objectives are, what our challenges are, and how our strategy for dealing in order of priority with those challenges. That's it, guys. So that's my bark for the day. So I can only wish you all health and escape from the corona, and our very warm wishes from Eilat in Israel.